Welcome to Latinas Uprising. This is a space for Latinas to talk about how to get to law school, through law school, and how to establish a successful career as a new attorney. I'm Nubia, and today I want to talk to you about the best parts of law school and the worst parts of law school. Let's get started. So generally speaking, almost everyone has heard that law school is horrible, and I have probably done quite a few videos that talked about how much I disliked law school. In fact, I think there's a video called I Hated Law School or something to that effect. Law school is really, really rough, and I wanted to use this video to talk about both the good and the bad because so much of the bad is highlighted, and I wanted to get into the bad with a little bit more detail about why it can be a really difficult experience. But I also want to talk about the good side of law school. It does exist, and not just the fact that it allows you to eventually be a lawyer, but really like the benefits of law school and why for me it wasn't just 3 years that were horrible and then I could finally practice. There were some good mixed into the bad that I think it's important for people to know so that you don't go into law school thinking it's going to be 3 years of misery, because that's not going to be the case at all. Law school can actually be a lot of fun once you get the hang of it. So let me start with the bad. Let me start with what's really horrible about law school. So one of the bad things about law school is that people really kind of make a mythology out of law school, of like people are gonna hide books and professors are gonna yell at you, and you go in kind of terrified because you just don't really know what to expect. So that anxiety that these next few months, years are not gonna be great, make it a really kind of crappy experience, especially if you have only heard bad things, which I will say most of us in the profession do a bad job of always highlighting the bad parts of law school, but it's because we're all traumatized, so please forgive us. So one of the things that can be really jarring about law school is that you enter your first semester and then you realize that there are these unspoken codes of conduct and expectations, but no one has told you what they are. And unless you know an attorney or know a law student, it can be really hard to figure out what's expected of you and how you're supposed to behave. And I'm not talking about like professionalism standards, though they themselves can be difficult to ascertain if you're not used to that environment. So like for me, I really struggled with the concept of having to wear a suit because to me that felt like such a foreign concept. I felt like I was putting on a costume, and that took me a while to get used to. That's just sort of professionalism standards in general, but it's things like knowing that you have to have a summer job and that you apply for it in the fall and you get ready for it like, early in the fall. That just seems so confusing to me because I had only worked in retail or customer service up until then, and no one really hired 6 months in advance for those jobs. And so knowing that I had to have my resume ready, that I had to start applying early in my first semester, it didn't really connect. And so that was something I struggled with because I just didn't understand the system. So it can just be really difficult to navigate a system that has these expectations, but no one has given you a roadmap and you're just supposed to figure it out. And other people seem to have already figured it out ahead of time, and you just feel lost and totally out of place. It's a bad feeling to have, and it's hard to overcome that. And the other thing that's hard about law school is the privilege that you see. I had always been used to being the poor student. I had always been used to having to work during school. That was nothing new. I'd been doing that since high school. But in law school, because the classes are so small and because there's such a gap in the haves and have-nots, that it made me so jealous. It made me so jealous that I had classmates that did not have to work when I did, who were able to afford housing that was much closer to the school, and I had a really long commute. It just was something that really gnawed at me because I knew, I guess for me, it's like I could sense the unfairness of it finally. Maybe it's because I was older, because I had a better recognition of things, but it was so jarring to me. It can really be super distracting when you see that you have classmates who don't have to work, who don't have to worry about finances, who can take on opportunities that aren't going to be paid for, like clerking, and are going to be okay, and yet you're here working and struggling so much to just kind of get a little bit of what they have. It can just be super frustrating, and it's one of the worst parts of law school for me. The last bad thing I want to mention about law school is that it rewires the way you think and the way you analyze. And that's not a bad thing, but it is a weird thing. It's a weird thing, especially your first year out, until you mellow out and become a normal person again, because you start viewing things through the lens of legal liability instead of like humanity and just the fact that people are involved in some type of situation. And that can be really jarring to your family, to your friends, to yourself. But eventually you do kind of return to a normal human being, but it is a little bit weird, especially after your first year. So I also want to talk about the positives of law school, because we always talk about the negatives. So I want to end on a high note. The rewiring and the way that we think is actually also a positive. Yes, as I mentioned at the beginning, you're kind of loopy with it, but eventually it stabilizes and you're able to use that, you know, to everyone's benefit. And being able to analyze in a truly objective way, where you're able to anticipate other people's arguments, where you're able to see the flaws in your own and counter that, it's just game-changing, and it really makes you a stronger, better advocate for yourself and for your clients. And I think that's a fantastic benefit to law school. The other thing is that you learn how to navigate these really complex systems. And I often talk about how the legal system is inflicted upon our communities. And so learning about those systems, learning how to navigate them, is always going to be beneficial, because you can come back to your community and show them how to overcome these systems that are often just inflicted upon us. The benefit about law school is that it makes you a better advocate. You're a better public speaker, a better writer, a better researcher than you were before you went in. And that is a fantastic skill that can be transferred onto different things, not just being a lawyer. And we are also trained to do it in a way where the normal person can understand us, right? Of course, we're all trained in legalese, and we could write a contract that no one understands if we needed to, but the school of thought in this modern era is really to make sure we are writing and advocating in a way that a normal person off the street, a jury, understands what we're trying to say. And so that means we're able to take really complex information and break it down so that anyone walking in off the street can understand it. That's not the case across all professions. Most of them are still writing in very technical ways. That means only those professionals can understand it. And I think that's what makes us so unique and different. And it's such a value add, because you can go into another setting and take on this complex information and really make sure that everyone understands it in a way that can support your position. And finally, the best thing about law school, I'm not gonna say the people, but it is sort of the relationship building that happens within the school. And what I mean by that is that not necessarily everyone in your section or in your class is gonna be your friend. That's not gonna happen. But what happens in law school is that you develop this habit of wanting to be a resource to others, because in law school it's where we really start honing this kind of networking muscle and recognize that we can be a benefit to other people just by knowing them. And that happens a lot. And I have classmates who I wasn't friends with. I can't even remember if we ever like hung out or like went to a bar together or anything like that. But if I bump into them at an event, we are friendly with one another. We see how each other is doing. We see if there's a connection there. Unless you're a straight up douchebag, people are going to be warm and feel an affinity towards you, because what happens is that we're trained again to be a resource to other people. So you might go to a networking event and you'll hear of a student who's interested in a certain area, and you'll think, oh, one of my classmates or someone I know that I interned with does the same thing, I'd like to connect you. And we're constantly kind of looking for that way to connect people because of this muscle that we started to flex and train when we started school. So it's just sort of nice to go into community, the legal community, with this mindset of being a resource to others. And I know not every lawyer takes up that mantle, but for the most part they do. I would say that most of us are looking for ways to help the next generation, are looking for ways to connect our colleagues with one another. It's just kind of part of those customs and expectations that no one told us about 1L year, but we eventually get the hang of once we're a few years in. So those are the best and worst parts of law school in my experience. I'm sure there's lots of things I left out. If you've been through law school, please let me know your top best and worst law school experience moments. I would love to know, to see how different, if you agree or disagree with my assessment. If you have any questions, please let me know below about law school or lawyering. I'm always happy to answer them. Please follow me at latinasuprising.com. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and follow this channel, and I will see you in the next video.